Hello, everyone, and welcome back to yet another week of our Cybersecurity Executive Brief. I am Corey Wolf, Director of Offensive Security for Risk360, and today is Wednesday, December 18th. That means that most of us are getting ready for the holiday season. Most of us are getting ready for a holiday slowdown, take some time off, recharge, get back to it come the new year. This will actually be, there'll be one more executive brief this year, but I hope you all have a great New Year and a great holiday season. So yes, today, Wednesday, December 18th, the year is over already. The year is over. So recently, this week, the Biden administration took some steps to retaliate against the China Telecom attack breaches. So this is something that we've covered quite a bit on the executive brief here every week. I'll say it again, probably one of the worst cyber incidents in national security history. It was a huge breach. Chinese threat actors, Salt Typhoon, as they're known, Chinese threat actors had virtually unlimited access to Verizon, AT&T, whole bunch of them, T-Mobile, a couple of them. One thing to note is that wasn't specific to the U.S. The U.S. was just one of, I believe, 8 countries that the threat actors went after, but clearly a very successful campaign for the threat actors. A huge breach of national security. Chris Krebs was on with Patrick Gray of Risky Business. They talked a lot about how Chinese APTs go after civilian infrastructure for reconnaissance purposes. They have a good conversation about the line between traditional reconnaissance and intelligence and military activity and that kind of thing. Really good conversation. I highly suggest you look it up. Chris Krebs, of course, first director of CISA back in 2017, I think. But very good conversation. Again, I highly recommend you check that out. But what's happening here is that the Commerce Department is banning China Telecom. So let's see, where does it say here? Notice issued last week to China Telecom. The Commerce Department detailed a preliminary finding that the company's presence in American networks and its provision of cloud services pose a national security risk to the United States. So they are basically telling China Telecom to cease operations in the United States. They gave the firm 30 days to respond, meaning that the final ban will almost certainly be up to the Trump administration. So, and this article at times goes on to talk about how it was a response to China's incursion deep into U.S. telecommunications network, providing Beijing access to data and conversations and giving it insight into spies in that the United States might be pursuing. One of the areas where the threat actors focused when they did gain access to these telecom networks were through the telecom network's lawful intercept systems. They also were able to drop in and listen to conversations or hijack conversations. This is why the FBI has complete 180 of their traditional communications to the public. The FBI has recommended that everyone use encrypted messaging apps. So good news is if you use iMessage, that's encrypted. Chats like Signal, those are encrypted. WhatsApp, I believe, is end-to-end encrypted. Don't quote me, I think so. But I even think the new RCS, so if you have an iPhone and it's been popping up when you talk to someone with an Android, it says RCS. I believe that's encrypted. I don't know, don't quote me. But what the threat actors would have had access to were the straight traditional SMS text messages being sent across the wire through these networks. Huge amount of data. So not only were they able to target the lawful intercept systems of the telecoms, they were able to read messages and other unencrypted communications. And the FBI said, hey, everyone, you should use encrypted communications because the telecommunication companies simply just have no idea of whether they were able to extract the threat actors. They have no idea. But this is an initial response to that. This is a pretty good article that goes into the history. Here you go. So in October this isn't new, right? So in October 2021, 9 months into Mr. Biden's term, the FCC revoked all licenses for China Telecom Americas to provide ordinary phone services in the United States, saying it was subject to exploitation, influence, and control by the Chinese government. But that didn't restrict China Telecom from having nodes on American networks. And basically, a node means that they're still connected, right? They're still part of the internet. And that means that they still have the power to, quote, peer in to internet and phone traffic. So this new order removes that that ability, is essentially basically completely banning them from operating everything and anything in the United States. This is not new. Of course, in 2021, like we just read, some steps were taken to stop China Telecom from operating ordinary phone services in the U.S. Also, in April of 2024, as part of a broader ruling, not ruling, but a broader order from the FCC, excuse me, they did bar Chinese telecom carriers from offering U.S. broadband services. So they did this in April of this year. This was part of the broader net neutrality order, which came down in April. But the Federal Communication Commission said Thursday is ordering U.S. units of China Telecom, China Unicom, and China Mobile to discontinue fixed or mobile broadband operations in the United States. This is not new. The federal government has been slowly but surely removing Chinese ISPs and Chinese ISP-related activities from the U.S. So in the 90s, yeah, Chinese organizations started to buy up or start ISPs in the United States, and since probably the mid 2010s, the U.S. government has slowly but surely been removing them for national security reasons, of course. But this is not new. The federal government has been basically blocking Chinese ISPs and ISP-related and internet service provider-related technologies like cloud providers from operating in the U.S. The thought there is that any Chinese company is an extension of the Chinese government and basically has to do what the Chinese government says, and therefore they are a national security threat. So, I mean, yeah, I guess this is a good first step. I'm curious as to see what happens when a new administration rolls in. They've had a lot of talk about more offensive operations. That may or may not be the right way to go. This is something that I think probably should have happened anyways. I don't know why they would have left this piece in place. Maybe there's other reasons I just don't know about, but yeah, more needs to be done. More needs to be done. No question about it. Amazon has refused the Microsoft 365 deployment because of lax cybersecurity. So in CSO Online, the one that we're looking at here, they're talking through. They're a little. I like their wording here. Security executives applaud Amazon for publicly shaming Microsoft security, although some suspect it is a thinly veiled AWS sales pitch. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. I don't disagree for Amazon doing this. What's happening here is that in 2023, I believe, Microsoft and Amazon came to an agreement for AWS to bring on all 1.6 million. I didn't realize. I mean, I knew they were big, but 1.6 million employees onto M365, which of course is the cloud version of Office and all the other stuff that we use every day. So they came to a deal which would have which would have but would have gave Microsoft $1.5 billion from Amazon for these services. So, you think your Microsoft bill is bad. Look at how about that one, right? $1.5 billion. And so they've slowly but surely been working through this deployment. Right now, AWS employees have the local versions of Office installed on their machines. So AWS employees do not use the cloud version of Office, so they don't use M365. And the reason for this pause deployment, we'll say, and they call out, is the 2020. Well, we've talked about this a bunch. In January of 2024, Microsoft disclosed that Russian intelligence services, the SVR, had gained access to their tenant, the Microsoft corporate tenant, and SVR was all up in there. They gained access through a test tenant, did what's called service principal abuse moved into the Microsoft corporate tenant, and for all intents and purposes had global admin there. Bad, real bad. And so this is the incident that AWS is calling out specifically, but they've basically put a pause on and said, "Hey, this is no good." So, being Amazon and being a $1.5 billion contract, of course, they can make uh, demands really from Microsoft that most of us can't, as far as security controls go, security reporting goes, and so they've paused on that deployment, citing security concerns. And so, yes, it could be a thinly veiled AWS sales pitch, but in the reality, I mean, Microsoft by far is the worst offender when it comes to cybersecurity incidents. I'm stealing this from, I'm on a Chris Krebs kick for some reason, but stealing a line from him, which I believe he stole from someone else, and where the line was, Microsoft should be in the business of making secure products, not security products. So whether you like it or not, whether this is a thinly veiled AWS sales pitch, the fact of the matter is that Microsoft, since its inception, has been insecure. Sure, they've gotten better, but if you look at breaches compared to Microsoft and AWS and Google, there's clearly a big outlier there, of which is Microsoft. So that's what's going on now. From what I understand, it's not like the entire thing was canceled. They've just put a pause on it until Microsoft has implemented some better features. One of those being, better logging. So they call it inadequate logging here, is one of the big issues. So AWS wants more telemetry into what their users are doing in Microsoft M365. So that's what's going on. They put a pause on it. They didn't totally pull it out, and they put a pause on it and basically told Microsoft, you need to implement these controls before we move any further. AWS employees do use Office products, just simply the installed versions. They do not have access to the online version of that product suite. CISA has put out an advisory here, talking about what are known as human-machine interfaces. So these are interfaces that are primarily in wastewater and water systems. And so they put out an advisory this week where, so what do they say? The EPA and CISA often identify internet-exposed human-machine interfaces through scanning via publicly available web-based search platforms. So this is like they went into Shota and did a search. They went into Census and did a search, or whatever. And they're looking at all these HMIs exposed to the internet for no good reason. Why? But anyways, they are basically saying, hey, we're scanning all the time, looking for HMIs. And in the absence of cybersecurity controls, unauthorized users can exploit HMIs in water and wastewater systems to view the contents of the HMI, including the GUI, distribution system maps, event logs, and security settings, and then make unauthorized changes and potentially disrupt the facility's water and or wastewater treatment process. Yikes. And then they call out threat actors have demonstrated the capability to find and exploit internet-exposed HMIs with cyber security weaknesses easily. For example, in 2024, pro-Russia hacktivists manipulated HMIs at water and wastewater systems, causing water pumps and blower equipment to exceed their normal operating parameters. And so basically, hacktivists in this example searched Shodan or Census, found some of these HMIs, which probably had no password or default credentials, and started messing with stuff. And so CISA and the EPA call out mitigations. I don't know what it's like to work at CISA. I mean, they're basically saying, hey, you should inventory your stuff. Don't expose them from the internet. If it can't be, secure it by creating a username and strong password to prevent a threat actor from easily viewing and accessing the devices.